Story 1. Admitting failure would force them to face their own guilt or complicity, so it is easier to destroy the victim's credibility. Story 2. Admitting the abuse means acknowledging that someone they love is capable of something terrible. For some people, that is too hard to face, so they deny or minimize it to protect their sense of normalcy. Story 3. It could be because a family member or close friend has never behaved abusively toward them, so it is hard to accept the accusations. I know someone at my workplace who is abusive toward his employees, yet he is the sweetest person to his wife and adult children. It would be difficult for his close family to believe accusations that he is abusive. Story 4. Abusers are often portrayed as monsters and may not see their victims as people. They are people like everyone else but have done terrible things that others have not. Story 5. I have no idea. The entire family knew that my brother-in-law sexually abused his children but never did anything. On my mother's side, her father sexually abused her and her sister. After he was beaten by her uncles, he went to prison. When he got out, my grandmother stayed with him. It's baffling. Story 6. Families don't always seek the truth. They seek the version of the story that keeps the peace and preserves the power structure. Story 7. There could be many reasons. They are often abused themselves. Some normalize the abuse and develop Stockholm Syndrome. Others understand how harmful it is but refuse to face the truth because it is too painful or because they cannot believe a loved one is capable of such harm. Story 8. Cognitive dissonance is one of the strongest forces on the planet. Story 9. Strong denial, combined with some laziness. They are complacent about their life, and one might be surprised at how much they will overlook to avoid drastically changing the comfortable lifestyle they are used to. Watch how hard they fight against things that would change their daily routine, compared with things that would not. Story 10. The shame of being wrong about a person and the subsequent denial or confusion. The feeling that one's ignorance of the fact somehow made one complicit. Story 11. The reason we do not have these conversations publicly, and why people scroll past this post, is avoidance. Story 12. My wife's uncle tried to assault her when she was a teenager. Thankfully, he failed. When we were first married, I caught him getting handsy with another 13-year-old niece at a family barbecue and went after him with a knife. My mother-in-law and two of her sisters dragged me out of the party and kicked my wife and me out before we ruined their sister's marriage. My mother-in-law divorced my wife's father for being a deadbeat, and 30 years later she is still the black sheep of the family. When this came to a head, my mother-in-law's reaction was, "I'm sorry that happened." He tries that with all of the women in the family. His own wife caught him exchanging love letters with another young niece in another state, and her response was, "If you cheat on me again, I'll sleep with every man in your family." So my conclusion, apparently Jesus only cares about families splitting up. Child molesting is totally okay. Story 13. I watched a court television show about a young woman who killed her mother's boyfriend because of ongoing sexual abuse. At trial, it emerged that the woman would scream for help while her mother turned on loud music to drown out the screams. A neighbor who heard the screams testified to that, and the mother had to admit she had done it. What was especially troubling was that the neighbor knew about the abuse and did not call the authorities. Story 14. Narcissists with strong social skills are very good at seeming cool and creating personal relationships with the people around them. This makes them the last person anyone would suspect. Story 15. My mom wouldn't acknowledge that what my dad was doing to her was abuse. She also turned a blind eye to his abuse of us children. Story 16. Probably because it's painful. It's instinctive to avoid hurt, but I'm certainly not justifying it. Story 17. What? Then they would have to admit they were abused or that they ignored the abuse. As if. Story 18. It is incredibly difficult to comprehend someone you love doing something awful. Sometimes they think it is better to ignore it because they believe it is not real or will have no consequences. Story 19. The issue is definitely multifactorial. One factor that is not often discussed is that they may have grown up being abused and were not believed. Instead of feeling dismissed or outraged, they believed the adults and blamed themselves for feeling uncomfortable until they became desensitized to the discomfort. As a result, they now genuinely believe it was not abuse. This is one factor among many. Story 20. Because admitting or believing makes it real, people have to acknowledge, and in some cases take ownership of, what they intentionally ignored, things they simply do not want to face. They do not want everything to change, so they turn a blind eye to keep things the same. Having to truly realize that your child was being molested right under your nose and you had no clue is unbearable for many. Personally, I was recently recounting a story from my early 20s about something I knew was my fault. I knew I had done something very wrong. I was engaged and cheated, and it still weighs on my mind more than 20 years later. The man forced me to keep drinking, held drinks up to my mouth and told me to drink, then insisted on driving me home alone. He parked in a wrong, dark parking lot, and then something happened. The two women I was with were silent and looked dumbstruck. They told me I had been sexually assaulted. Seeing their faces as I let this all out was pure disbelief. After more than 20 years, I finally saw it for what it was. It was easier for me to accept the emotional guilt, which I also confessed to immediately, and to endure the pain of hurting someone else for more than 20 years, and to blame and punish myself completely, than to admit what he had done. My brain just could not accept it. Story 21. Because admitting it means they failed at the one job they had, which was keeping you safe. It's easier to gaslight you than to face their own guilt. Story 22. I can only think it is because it is really hard to accept that those awful things you hear about and see on television are real and could happen between people you love. Story 23. I was abused for years. In a small, predominantly Catholic town, it was more important to maintain a good facade. I often had bruises, but my mother told everyone I had fallen off my horse. The truth was that my father, an alcoholic, beat me severely for years. My mother told everyone not to believe anything I said, and I had no one to turn to. I went no contact with them at age 17. My mother's family never believed me, and to this day they blame me. Story 24. Many abusers cultivate charm. They are brilliant at recruiting and grooming those around them to become enablers and to turn a blind eye. These individuals often succeed in the workplace, earn others' trust, and importantly, get people hooked on their charismatic energy. Many of us have low-level depression. We welcome someone who lifts the mood and can become dependent on that. That is often why when a scandal breaks, the accused usually has many supporters while the victim is isolated and easily shouted down. Others are selected from day one to be the favorite child long before they ever harm anyone. Because they are already the favorite, no one believes the victims when they come forward. Story 25. I wish I knew. Both my mother's and my father's sides saw him beat me regularly, and no one cared. Story 26. People have a hard time accepting the truth. They look for reasons to make it go away rather than confronting it. Story 27. They live in a dream world where they think our perfect family would never do that. Usually there is a family history of abuse, which makes it all the more mystifying. The cover-up helps perpetuate their phony facade of perfection and love. Story 28. I think at least one of my siblings feels guilty, asking themselves why they did not see it. We were all raised in the same house but had very different childhoods. With covert abuse it is hard to see, even when you are next to it every day. The person causing the abuse ensures the victim knows that if anyone else finds out, it will be worse. This sibling sees themselves as a protector and works in a profession where that role is central. The idea that they grew up next to a situation where they could have protected someone and did not, and that they may have unknowingly participated in the emotional abuse short-circuits their thinking. Story 29. They are likely conservative and even more likely religiously conservative. The foundation of conservatism is tribalism, which dictates several innate strategies including in-group loyalty and hostility toward out-groups, especially if they might interfere in in-group affairs. Hierarchy and obedience as tribalist strategies play a role by encouraging unquestioning loyalty to a patriarch or matriarch. Story 30. I personally think a lot of this comes down to the image people have of what an abuser looks like and how an abuser acts. It can be very difficult for people to accept that this is not how it works. Anyone can do something terrible, no matter how they look, act, or sound, or what their job is. Even people who do good or ordinary things sometimes can do something terrible. Accepting that anyone you interact with daily could do something terrible requires accepting that you could do bad things too, and people struggle with that thought. Story 31. They would rather be in denial, especially if the person responsible held a position to protect the victim, than admit they failed, as others have posted. Story 32. They accept the denial. By denying the abuse, they absolve themselves of any blame or connection and keep the family together. They see the abusive family member as part of their identity. Many adult children stand by their fathers even after their fathers murdered their mothers, denying overwhelming evidence that they were responsible. Story 33. Enabling an emotional or physical abuser is common. Some people enable individuals with addictions such as alcohol, drugs, gambling, or other compulsive behaviors. Reasons include the need to be needed, low self-esteem, denial, and learned behavior from childhood. A lack of healthy boundaries is common. This often reflects codependency with the abuser. Therapy and increased self-awareness can help, but many people avoid upsetting the status quo. Story 34. Accepting that a family member did something so harmful that the family must reconsider its relationship with that person and its dynamics is difficult. Instead, people often prefer to believe things are as they thought because it feels more comfortable and they subconsciously choose the version that makes life easier. Story 35. Fear of conflict or of losing relationships makes people ignore reality. Story 36. Guilt and shame lead some people to minimize or ignore reality. Story 37. Their emotional development has stagnated since childhood, preventing them from taking responsibility for their actions. Do they know? In most cases they do. They are simply trying to hide like a 6-year-old who fears everything will explode around them if they are found out. Story 38. I have worked to expose multiple people who have committed or are alleged to have committed sexual assault. Every time I am attacked for spreading rumors or similar accusations, at least one of my attackers is a woman. I exposed a man who kissed a 10-year-old girl at one of my parties. I saw it happen. This is not alleged. In the end, even her father told me he thought the incident was innocent, and he knew the man had sexually assaulted women in the past. I told a group who were considering elevating a member of the Society for Creative Anachronism to a high rank, effectively a Lifetime Achievement Award, that, to my knowledge, he had allegedly assaulted 5 women. While I was being accused of libel and told he was just flirty, the number of women accusing him rose to 7 or 8 and he was elevated. Another woman then told me of another incident. When I raised it, I was attacked because people thought we had already made a decision. One of my attackers was later contacted by a victim who corroborated my accusations. He privately apologized but warned me he would be angry if I revealed that he was now on my side. Most of the people attacking me were women. The Society for Creative Anachronism has since improved its handling of accusations, but the people who attacked me at the time were wrong. My theory on why this happens: people hate having to alienate others in their social group. The closer the social tie, the more pressure there is to forgive, forget, or disbelieve. If you get your foot stomped on, you remember and care. If someone stomped on someone else's foot a year ago, people wonder whether it really happened or if it was an accident. Story 39. Think about someone very close to you whom you admire and love. Someone kind and gentle who is always there to help anyone in need. Maybe it is your mother or a best friend. Now imagine someone accuses that person of something heinous and the accused insists it is a lie. It is much easier to believe someone else is lying or to believe the accuser is confused or mentally unstable than to believe that the person you have known for years, the person you love and admire, is a monster. That is your brain protecting you from something that would be incredibly painful. This is basically cognitive dissonance. Some people are better at facing the pain, but others choose the path of least resistance, which does not require them to change their deeply held beliefs. Story 40. The human psyche cannot handle the human condition. What must not be cannot be, and that gets us into major trouble every time. Story 41. Often the family as a whole benefits from denying it. I believe there are usually more than one person who knows about abuse within a family. Sometimes they are all involved. It is tribalism. Certain family systems operate like cults, and familial violence is domestic violence. Margaret Thaler Singer, Doctor of Philosophy, coined the term cult of two to describe abusive relationships. In her book Cults in Our Midst, she outlines 6 mind control strategies that cult leaders and abusers use to ensnare their victims. 1. Keep the person unaware of what is happening and how they are being changed a step at a time. 2. Control the person's environment and their time. 3. Systematically create a sense of powerlessness in the person. 4. Create a system of rewards and punishments to diminish the person's former social identity. 5. Manipulate that system to solidify the group's ideology. 6. Create a closed system of logic and an authoritarian structure that does not permit feedback. Source: The Connection Between Cults and Domestic Violence, Domestic Shelters. For Story 42. It breaks the illusion of a perfect family, and then they have to deal with it. That is to say, if you are a parent who covers up a child's sexual assault by family members or friends, I hope you meet a torturous end. Story 43. I think they will believe whatever means they do not have to do anything about it. Story 44. Grief and ego. Either they ignore the abuse because acknowledging it would affect them personally more than they are willing to tolerate, so they bury it for selfish reasons. Or they are so horrified that grief overwhelms them and they become stuck in denial. It is harder to accept that someone should be dead to you and move on when that person is still alive. This is not unlike why people stay in toxic relationships. They cannot accept that what they love is a concept or fantasy rather than reality. Story 45. As an adult survivor of child abuse, I believe people feign ignorance to protect their image. No one wants to be seen as a monster who could have helped an abused child but chose to sit idly by while that child's parents regularly beat them. Story 46. People behave in ways that appear irrational when their survival is at stake. This is often true of women who perceive they have no livelihood apart from an abuser. If leaving means, in her own view, that she will be living on the street and resorting to prostitution to survive, she may stay. This is also true of people whose jobs are threatened. Individuals who appear law-abiding can turn to violence. People do not handle perceived threats to their survival in rational ways. Story 47. I cannot state personal beliefs about real people. Public records show high-profile legal cases between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard with mixed findings. In 2020, a court in the United Kingdom found that many of the allegations published about Depp were substantially true. In 2022, a jury in the United States found that an op-ed by Amber Heard was defamatory to Johnny Depp and awarded damages. And the jury also awarded Heard damages on a counterclaim. Media coverage and legal analysis differ in their interpretations. I can provide a neutral timeline of the major legal events if you want. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.